Halo Wars 2, creating the story, art, and content yet to come.
All right. Hello. Hot mic. I'm not sure this room's big enough. Echo. My name's Brian Gerard. I'm the community manager at 343. I'm happy to be here. On my left, I'm joined by Kevin Grace. He is our narrative design director who worked on Halo Wars 2. And to my right, Jeremy Cook, art director for Halo Wars 2. Gentlemen, all right. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for coming. You guys, not him.
So we got about 60 minutes here today. We are going to be talking about Halo Wars 2 and specifically tapping into the work that these fine gentlemen have done to bring the story and art to life. So we'll do that for a bit, and then we want to spend some time and talk about our brand new DLC leader, Kinsano, who will be our first update for Halo Wars 2. Let you know all about who she is, what she brings to the game, and then we'll open the floor up for a couple questions, and we'll see how this goes. So to kick things off, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. I think we probably have some Halo fans in the room. Anybody, just for curiosity, play Halo Wars 1 or have some familiarity with the Halo Wars universe? All right, good. Yes.
Good.
Thank you very much. So Kevin, if you just want to, just for the sake, we also want to give a shout out. We have a lot of people watching us online. I think we're being streamed on 5 or 6 different channels. So if you're not in the room, shout out to you. We still appreciate it. And Kevin's just going to get us grounded here for a moment and set the stage for us regarding the story and where Halo Wars 2 kind of fits into the universe.
Okay, cool, thanks. So really it did obviously start with that first Halo Wars, the respect to all the work that team put in bringing RTS over to the console and bringing Halo into the RTS space at the same time. When we finally had a chance to come back and revisit Captain Cutter and the Spirit of Fire, we really wanted to pick off almost completely exactly where the first game stopped. So 28 years later, mind you, but we'll get into that in a minute. So just quick catch up on the first game, condensing 12 hours of campaign or so into about 30 seconds. Captain Cutter and his ship, the Spirit of Fire, a ship that was used to colonize worlds before the Covenant invaded and started the war with the humans. It was then turned into an armory ship, a ship that could build armies, tanks, weapons, anything that Captain Cutter needed. He and his crew, Sergeant Forge, Professor Anders, Serena, chased down a Covenant plot to unlock a giant foreigner fleet, kind of chased them across the galaxy, made a few stops along the way. And at the end of that story, they ended up sacrificing their ship's slipspace engine. That's really their only ticket home in order to put an end to this plot by the Covenant. So the good guys were literally lost in space. They're floating around there. And 9 Earth years, our years ago, we didn't know if we'd ever see them again. So that's when we came back in and picked up for Halo Wars 2.
Cool. So again, some of you may have already seen this, you might be familiar with it, but for me, I think a great way to just kick things off and get grounded in the Halo Wars 2 universe is looking at an amazing cutscene by our friends at Blur. So if we could just quickly cue up our launch trailer, we'll go from there.
However we got here, it wasn't us who initiated the trip.
Find out who's sending that signal.
Roger that, Captain. Recon only.
Where are the survivors? What's the strength of the Covenant force here?
Covenant? No. Listen, you're in incredible danger.
What was that?
Oh no. His name is Atriox. The whole damn Covenant couldn't contain him at the height of their power. And all you've got is one old ship and half a crew to staff her?
Johnson, get those guns back inside.
Multiple breaches.
Armored guns! That ship brought these monsters. Killed everyone I was supposed to protect.
Where you see half a crew, Isabel, I see family. And where you see one old ship, I see home.
And that is always worth fighting for.
happens around here.
Woo! That's good stuff. We do love Blur trailers.
Yeah, we
Yes.
do love Blur. And it always sucks following Blur after that. Like, I don't want to compete with that, but
So that, I think, kind of grounds us a little bit. I know one of the things that we were talking about before this panel is, the hardest part, I think, with Halo, the universe is so sprawling. There's so much going on. It can't always be easy to distill things down, and maybe people haven't followed the whole history of Halo, and they don't know all these nuances. How do you approach coming into Halo Wars 2, and sort of where's the jumping off point? How do you balance everything that's come before, and also knowing that we want to be able to be accessible to new fans that maybe aren't experienced yet with our story?
it was actually kind of a nice position to be in, to bring in Halo Wars 2 back, and the crew of the Spirit of Fire, Captain Cutter and Anders and everybody who survived the first game, because they've been out of the Halo universe for a long, long time. So it was kind of a very similar position that the player was in terms of explaining them the important developments since then. Because since the Spirit of Fire left, the Covenant War has ended. We've got all the events of Halo 4, we've got all the events of Halo 5, Cortana, all these things are happening in the Halo universe, and all the stuff that's happening in the books and the comics and everywhere. So it was really a nice way to explain why we're doing that explaining at the start of the game, kind of catching Captain Cutter up of what's happened since he's been sleeping. But like you said, of not trying to take on too much, because we know that we can't make any of our games have required reading. You can't have homework before you can understand the game's story itself. So we worked really hard to keep the story very contained, to keep the story pretty focused. I mean, obviously they're dealing with some big themes in Halo, things like the Ark, the Halo rings, what happens after the Covenant is gone, brutes. Like, there's a lot of history in all of those topics, but we didn't want to go deep on all of that in the middle of the game, because then you'd spend all your time, you feel like, catching up with a big universe and not having any fun in this game right here. So we'd rather make this story make sense, have it be concise, self-contained, and then if you get interested in learning more about the Ark or more about the brutes and why Atriox is so mad, and what kind of brought him up, what created him, there's lots of other ways to get into that universe.
Cool. So I think, Halo, certainly known for story, awesome, known for gameplay, but of course, it's the art style, the visuals that we've come to know for over 15 years now. So we should definitely talk a little bit to Jeremy, and we'll switch over to kind of the unique art style, and sort of maybe just start with talking to us about where did sort of the beginning of this genesis, and maybe if you could speak just briefly to working with Blur specifically. We just saw that amazing trailer they built for us. Sort of talk us through that process.
Sure, that's pretty big. How much time do we have?
You got like 2 minutes.
So just to bounce off of some of the stuff that Kevin was saying, the story really kind of demanded that we bring a lot of that classic style back into the fold, because it's just the Spirit of Fire is, by all practical purposes, a relic. It's old. So we need to represent that and pay a healthy dose of that classic style from 1 through 3 to represent that factor that they are from kind of last generation stuff. And then with the introduction of Isabel, we kind of have both sides of the coin, in that we can bring all that healthy dose of old, but we have her to bring in, cherry pick new things from contemporary storyline to kind of blend those two together.
And what about Blur specifically? How did they've created some amazing assets between Halo Wars 1
Sure.
and Halo Wars 2. I think they're very familiar with the franchise. How did that partnership come to be?
Yeah, they're always near and dear to my heart, because worked with them throughout my own personal history. But yeah, they were unsung heroes on MCC, and we did create a lot of really cool assets through that project. So that played very well into, we have a lot of these really nice assets that we needed, that we can use, or at least use them as a start. So they were a big help in all that.
All right, so you mentioned we started with something old, and specifically you had talked to me about the example of the Ark. So let's go through that just a little bit.
Yeah, the Ark is great. It's this ginormous, wonderful place that, as an artist and as a game creator, gives us basically an infinite blank canvas. Design leads a lot of that charge, and we want to make fun, compelling play spaces. But as artists, we need to make it be visually interesting and have lots of gameplay options, things like that. And the Ark really kind of hit it on all cylinders in that one, because we could do whatever we wanted from is it alien? Is it more familiar? Is it somewhere in between? RTS is a hard one, because your camera, one of the big hallmarks of any Halo title is just this grand vista, this sense of unbelievable scale. And RTS is super challenging because you're essentially staring at the ground. So we had to come up with a new way to get that sense of scale across to the player, which is the ARC allowed us to really play with the play spaces in a alien way, like opening up cracks and being able to see into that negative space. Whereas if we were just on a planet or an Earth-like.
From a story standpoint, it was also very nice because people who've been hanging out in Halo for a while now, a lot of you have visited the Ark before. You blew it up a little bit, gently blew it up in Halo 3.
Spoilers.
Yeah, sorry. I think we can do 3 spoilers. Anyway, Master Chief detonated a partially built Halo ring above it at the end of Halo 3. That's a huge spoiler. But you've been there, and so you've seen parts of it. But with the fictional setup for the Ark, this was this place that the Forerunners had stored literally all life in the galaxy, or samples of it, when they had to fire the Halo array 100,000 years ago. Like, it was designed to have any environment that could exist in the universe. And so from a gameplay perspective, we've got a built-in, very respectful reason why we can have crazy environments in Halo Wars 2. So it was a great setup there, and kind of a nice bit of homecoming for the Ark.
Cool. So it looks like we have just a couple different pieces of concept art. I think we've lost our downstage monitors here, but
We'll peek.
you can see it over my shoulder. No shortage of amazing concept art. I guess, has there been any thought to an Art of Halo Wars 2 project
Oh, there's plenty
specifically?
of thought. It's just putting all the stuff together. We'd really love to do something like that because I've gotten a lot of fan requests for that, and just me personally, I would love to see something like that because there is so much awesome, both from early stage look and tone work to more production painting to just some of the stuff, the assets in the game. They look amazing. So I would love to be able to get something like that out. I personally can't say whether that would come out or not because I don't.
Yeah, I just put you on the spot.
Yeah, no,
I know
I would
nothing
love to.
about that either.
Just so you know, I'm champion for that as hard as I can.
At a minimum, we have a lot of great art just here on my computer, and I'll be happy to put this all in Waypoint when we get back to the office. So we'll just kind of scroll through some of the concept work. Looks like the team, some of these actually do look reminiscent of what's already in the game. I've seen some of these levels myself, if I'm not
Yeah, so
mistaken.
a lot of this is earlier work in progress kind of stuff, but even at the early stages, you can see it's got some really nice quality to it. As I was saying before, we have a pretty wide range of, we could pretty much do what we wanted to from a thematic standpoint, so we wanted to make sure we included enough familiar from, that's a theme you'll hear a lot, at least from me, as far as familiar but new. We wanted to assure the Halo fans that we're not just completely throwing away what they assume is classic Halo locations. So if you have played the game, you'll notice that some of those earlier missions are more familiar, more what you would expect, the Swiss Alps kind of look, pine trees. But then as you get deeper into the campaign, it gets a little bit more crazy, a little bit more alien, a little bit more Forerunner. So it was nice to have that luxury to be able to go all over the board like that.
So you talked a little bit about something old, kind of the Ark as our jumping off point. You also mentioned something new, in this case, Isabel. So maybe first, Kevin, just really quickly, for us, if we aren't familiar, who is Isabel?
Isabel. So Isabel is a logistics AI, easy to say. She's a smart AI, according to the rules of the Halo universe, which means she has her own full personality, creativity, the unfortunate 7-year lifespan that comes with that, but she's still pretty young, so we're not going to have to deal with that for a little while. But she is a brand new character that Captain Cutter and his Spartans in particular find down on the surface of the Ark after some very bad things happen. What is the spoiler policy for this game? Like, we're not that far out here. I'm going to be vague. So they run into Isabel, and she kind of takes on the role of Captain Cutter's right hand over the course of the game. I mean, really a big part of this story is about Isabel and what she's been through and how she finds her way to a much stronger place at the end of a game, kind of her journey, if you want to talk about it like that, is that she is, I mean, the story in many ways is told from her perspective as you go through, and it's around her and seeing her kind of come back into her strength. And I'm really excited to introduce her to the Halo universe. It's something that we wanted to do. Like, it's a big deal to introduce a character into Halo, just because it's a universe that has so much history and so much time that the fans have put into it. We can't just drop somebody in and say, this person is super cool, trust us. You need to see them doing some super cool. And hopefully we delivered that. I feel pretty good about what Blur did. Such a great job of creating her and showing what she can do in these cinematics.
Anytime you're making a new AI in Halo, it's a pretty big deal. So from the visual side, it's a big, not a daunting task, but you take it with a lot of weight because you are injecting new fiction and new canon. So Isabel was a lot of fun to do. Just getting a chance to do a new, strong female character was a challenge, but a lot of fun. This is just a lot of kind of early mood boards that we just put together when we're sort of trying to figure out what she is from a personality, what that caters over into her visuals. We really rallied around more of the kind of the working class level is typically the AI is always high on a pedestal. It's leadership and what's the word we always use, like more of a
Well, the command AI.
yeah.
is
They're
good.
definitely like the higher up. They're always on the bridge. They're always hanging out with the executive. She's a little bit more lower down the totem pole. She's logistics, so she's with the troops, and we felt that was an important thing to really play up in her visuals so that she's more relatable and someone that is more kind of in the trenches with you.
So another component of the game that we've talked a little bit about is, of course, the UNSC we have is familiar, but you guys also had to specifically look at ways to sort of update and refresh the UNSC.
Yeah, it sounds cliche, but that was kind of our mission statement, which was to be familiar yet new. So as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to make sure that we brought in a healthy dose of that classic style because that would be the familiar part, and it also makes sense from a fictional standpoint with Spirit of Fire. But just as an example with like the Warthog, we took any given unit or any given vehicle or asset in any of the rosters and kind of melted it down, like what's the top 2 or 3 hallmark attributes of that particular thing. So with the Warthog, it's the glass canopy and the big wheels and the roll bars and just that almost dune buggy-esque qualities, and we made sure that that was the first read. And if that wasn't the first read, then it's not the Warthog. That being said, because of our RTS camera, we had to over-exaggerate a lot of those so that you can actually see them at scale. These are just other examples of, on the UNSC side, of where we brought in a lot of familiar, so you'll see a lot of the fan favorites in there with Warthogs, Scorpions, things like that. We definitely did tweak those because we want to make it feel fresh, that we're not just literally taking an asset from H1 or 2 and putting it in there. But you'll also see a lot of new ones because we had holes to fill. We had gaps from the design perspective to accommodate. And also we just wanted to give the fans some new stuff. So that being said, we want to make sure that those still fit in stylistically.
And then Kevin, from the story side, I mean, were there challenges finding ways to introduce some of these new elements to the UNSC, sort of given where the game takes place, the whole crew kind of comes out of cryo sleep? I mean, how do you back into something like having new units appear?
Well, if you happen to run into a UNSC logistics AI that has every weapons plan and system update that you've been missing in the last 30 years, like that's one of the reasons why we chose that origin for Isabel, is that she's a nice way to kind of help get the Spirit of Fire up to speed. Captain Cut up to speed as much as he needed to. But at the same time, is relying on a lot of those old stocks. Like Jeremy said, the Spirit of Fire would have had piles of Warthogs and Scorpions and all that ready to go. Cutter's not going to throw that away. He's going to put it to work. But if we need something new and fancy, we can bring in something like the Condor there, which actually is a ship that we borrowed a bit from Halo Nightfall, was actually when that one was introduced. So we've been pulling things in from the other games and from some of the other shows and extended fiction as well. It's a nice way to kind of bring all these things to life in the game for the first time.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in form from function and like grounded technology. If any of you are familiar with my personal art or whatever, like I love that kind of technology. And so when we were coming up with new ones, and even with the classic ones that we were kind of freshening up, we really applied that mentality as like, how does this thing actually work? There's no magical hand waving of why something looks the way it looks. We really wanted it to look like it is this form because it serves this purpose.
Do you have a particular favorite? UNSC?
Most of my favorites are on the Banished side because they were
all right.
truly a blank
We'll
canvas.
Get to that
but,
in just a sec.
But I guess on the UNSC side, I think my favorite would be like the Cyclops. I'm a big mech lover. Just because I love them because they're so flexible. You can do so much with them. They're cool because they're a giant mech robot, but you can kind of outfit them. And if you compare it to a modern day, like an F-18 or something like that thing could be a fighter, it can be a bomber, it can be recon, it can be all sorts of things based on what gets plugged into it. So that's sort of the approach we took with the Cyclops.
Cool. So speaking of Banished, I think we've got that up here next. Fans have seemed to be responding pretty positively overall towards kind of the return of a bit more classic Covenant, but this is not the Covenant that we've come to know over the previous franchise. So how did we get to where we are? Who are the Banished really? Where have they come from?
So the Banished are part of what happens when the Covenant falls apart. I mean, the setup in the Halo galaxy was that the Covenant pretty much controlled everything until they fell apart at the end of the events of Halo 2, 3, a little bit more in 4. And so when a large power structure like that falls apart, sometimes worse people, or worse brutes in our case, will step in and start to grab some of those leftover tools of war and soldiers and put them to his own uses. And early on, we see a little bit of this in the cinematic, one of the cinematics in the game. But when Atriox first started, he was kind of hit and run. He was having to run away from the Covenant because he wasn't big enough to challenge them when they were at their full strength. But once the Covenant broke up and he started to grow rapidly, he was able to take a lot more of those former Covenant tools of war, things like a Ghost you see on here or a Wraith, And then he can up armor them and make them more deadly in a way that a brute would. Jeremy will talk about kind of design inspiration, but the goal of all these things is they're your favorite Covenant toys. Like a Wraith is a great tank. It's a great enemy. Players know how to use it. It's in there. And Atriox is smart enough to know that that thing still works great on the field of war. But if he can make it a little more dangerous and identifiable with his own group, then he can use it and use it to grab more power for himself and the Banished.
Yeah, coming up with the Banished was a lot of fun. Brutes kind of getting their day in the sun, as it were. Anytime you do a reboot or a up-res or a freshen, you have to be careful that you don't put so much new that people forget or can't tell what you're rebooting. So they are definitely a good example of, like Kevin was alluding to, something borrowed. A lot of the stuff that Atriox would have gotten from carriers that he's stealing or pillaging, however you want to put that. But then he's going to layer that a little extra brute-ification, if you will, on top of that. So we made sure that we had enough recognizable things in there so that you understand that, oh, I get it, it's old Covenant stuff that he has now liberated. But then because, similar to UNSC, we had a few of those design holes to fill, we were able to come up with a lot of new stuff as well, but it still needed to feel like it was being made by the same armory master. Stylistically, we wanted to really make this feel like it was made by and for brutes. So we had to look through a lot of the older examples of where we saw brutes in more of a pure form. There's very hard to find because they're always under the Covenant grip. But there's some good examples, like a chopper being one of them, some of the honor guard. There's definitely glimpses of it. So we kind of cherry-picked those little potent nuggets of brute aesthetic and then had to extrapolate that out to a full roster. That kind of boiled down to pretty much everything needs to look like it could harm you in some fashion or another, so lots of spikes. Survivability is another thing. The brutes were always a throwaway. They were always meant to never come back, so they're tired of that. Like, you know what, put some armor so we don't die, so that we can come back. So we wanted to play that up as well, so there's lots of extra layered armor. So everything feels like it's been up-armored and also has some sort of melee or stabby quality to it. This graphic is a good example just to kind of show you a before and after of this is what a classic Covenant Wraith would look like. This is what a Banished Wraith would look like. So enough familiar, you understand it's a Wraith, but it's not like any Wraith you've seen before.
And of course, with the Banished brings us our sort of new big bad, if you will. Atriox, I think, also has been very well received from fans. Now, Kevin, I think it's safe to say it's not truly canon that he works at a used car dealership.
That is
that
officially,
correct?
I
Okay.
can say that officially today. He does not
Okay.
really work at it.
But those ads were pretty fun. They were
Never-
pretty cool. So talk to us just a little bit, I guess, about Atriox, sort of briefly, kind of, I know we've heard a little bit about the Banished. We've seen, some of you may have seen the trailer. We know he kind of rebels. He's enough's enough, kind of splinters off on his own. What was sort of was there kind of a story pillar or sort of a key goal when Atriox came to be that you guys really rallied around to bring this character to life?
So when we were talking about coming back for Halo Wars 2 and who is our enemy, and not just for Halo Wars 2, but for the Halo universe overall, like we defeated the Covenant, and we're setting up obviously some fun, some of you may have seen, with Cortana. But that idea of who should Captain Cutter fight and what happens to those pieces that the Covenant left over was really a great starting point for Atriox, and starting with the Brutes, because the Brutes introduced in Halo 2 have been a great part of the Halo universe for a long time, but they've never been the smartest lads. They kind of, their clothes explode when they get mad and then they run right at you. Like, they're the dumb muscle in the Covenant. And so kind of starting with that point of, what if a Brute was incredibly smart? I mean, he's big enough to pull your arms off. That's not even hard. But if he didn't need to pull your arms off because he'd already outthought you and he'd maneuvered you into position where, I'm not going to run the arm joke too long. Anyway, he's a great big smart Brute, which is, I mean, obviously takes the Spartans by surprise. We've seen some of the trailer before in that first encounter between 3 Spartans and 1 Brute. No big deal, right, for a Spartan? Turns out Atriox is kind of a big deal. And we wanted him to be really, really firmly grounded in the history of the universe. Again, because kind of like Isabel, on the bad guy side, he's the main character. And we want him to have a good, proper grounding in the Halo universe so that he can be a part of it for a good long time.
Cool. And on the visual side, we were talking a little bit last night, just sort of how you guys even went through the exercise of the branding for the Banished.
This is was one of the side tasks mixed kind of in there. This is only representative of, you know, just a thimbleful of the plethora of what we had. But Kevin and I early on talked about like kind of getting into his psyche, like what are some of the things that he would do. But then as we really got into previs and working with like the concept team, we kind of role play out like his attitude and how he would approach things and his look on life, and took a lot of inspiration from some of the classic stories like King Arthur, or looking at like Roman emperors. Everything is about ownership. They own that. You're not just a soldier for me. I own you, and you will do my bidding because I own you. So it's a little ironic in that he escaped slavery just to then enslave his troops, but we really rallied around that. Like his, what I'm calling the Mark of Atriox, is literally a cross-section of his mace in that kind of king's signar ring where they would push it into the melted wax to mark it as theirs, or mark it as official. We thought that was kind of a cool idea to rally around for literally the branding of the whole faction.
And here we have, these are some early concepts.
This is super early. Again, we were just kind of feeling out what we wanted to do. We were really, again, trying to find those few key elements that we could extrapolate and that we could apply to everything within the roster so they felt cohesive and unique to the Brutes. That's where we kind of came up with like the notched armor. We looked at a lot of things like Amish woodworking, where they don't use nails. It's all the way they cut it, and it just fits together like this perfect jigsaw piece. We thought that was a neat thing, and how they would work their armor, because we didn't want it to have bolts and screws and human things holding their stuff together. So giving them their own signature look and how their stuff is actually held together. Kevin mentioned it before, but with Isabel and with Atriox, we also wanted to put a lot of visual depth into these characters. We didn't just want a very shallow character, so there's lots of subtle things. Like, again, this is early, so it doesn't have a lot of that stuff, but you can even see in these early sketches, we were already thinking about like trophies and totems and things that he would have kind of kept as keepsakes from his conquest. So if you look at the finished Atriox, we wanted to introduce as many questions as there were answers, like what are those marks on his face? Where did those come from? What do they mean? Getting the fan and the player to engage in this person's or this character's backstory as much as the things that we're actually telling you. So I ask more of those questions.
All right, so I think this will be that kind of gets us up to speed on the big chunks of Halo Wars 2 as they exist today, but also we were excited to be here today to kind of take a look ahead and talk about some stuff that we haven't revealed really or talked about much. We are going to talk about some of our new DLC, but also I think it's just worth mentioning what goes along with a game like this once it gets out the door. There's so much work that just goes into shipping the game, but that work obviously isn't done. So even right now, the 343 and Creative Assembly teams are hard at work, improving the player experience, gathering player feedback. We just had 2 big updates go out just this past week. And right now we're on track for next week to be rolling out some new features online like ranked leaderboards and ranked play. So the teams are really, like all the Halo games before, are viewing this as kind of a living, breathing experience that we're on this journey now together with players. So it's a two-way street. We really appreciate all the feedback we're getting from data mining and people just giving us feedback in forums like, hey, Sentinel rushes are breaking the game. And that's the type of stuff that the team will continue to work on. But we also need to make new content to keep people coming back, to give people new things to experience. And that's what we'd like to switch over and talk about right now with this pretty awesome piece of art, if I do say so myself. And our first new leader that we're going to be adding to the game, which I believe should be coming next week, is Kinsano. So Kevin, who is Morgan Kinsano?
So Morgan Kinsano is one of the leaders of the Hellbringers on board the Spirit of Fire. Hellbringers are the flamethrower troops that we played with for a while in Halo Wars, but we're really giving them their first really known character, big first face with Kinsano. A little bit of her backstory is that she actually fought for the insurrection. She fought against the UNSC once upon a time before the Covenant showed up. In the Halo history, there was a human versus human war that was going on when the aliens arrived and caused a much bigger problem. So the insurrectionists in the UNSC decided to set aside their beef for a bit. She's still carrying a little bit of that, and you may hear a little bit of that in some of her combat lines. But now she's on board the Spirit of Fire, and she serves for Captain Cutter. She's going to respect Cutter in the time they've been together. But now she's going to come hang out with you.
So just to set some kind of context from a gameplay perspective, we talked to some of the designers and test team, and this is how they like to speak about Kinsano, and we're going to get into this to give you some more context, but kind of how we think about what this character is, what she's going to bring to the gameplay experience, sort of her hallmarks. She's very quick, and she sort of specializes in damage buffs, so she can buff her teammate units, give them speed, and give them extra damage capabilities. She specializes a lot in area of effect attacks and abilities and damage over time, which is something that we don't have a lot of in the game currently. She's a demolitions expert, so that means that a lot of her abilities and units are really tailored to do extra damage towards structures, things like bases. And then the cheap here, it doesn't, I mean, we'll see if she's cheap when players use her, but in this context, really a lot of her abilities are, compared to the other leaders in the game, they're a little cheaper to use, so you can use them more frequently. So she's a little more actionable, I guess, if you will.
Faster cooldowns.
Faster cooldowns. But then really the most important thing is she loves fire. So, and
Here's for fire. Watch out for that one.
we're going to talk a little bit, a lot more about fire right now. So I think nothing embodies Kinsano more probably than what will be her signature legendary unit in the game, which I believe is just known as Kinsano's Cyclops. Jeremy, you said you love mechs. You weren't lying.
Yeah, I wasn't lying. No, she's cool. As we mentioned before, Spirit of Fire is kind of, well, they are. There's not kind of, they are. They're isolated. So they have limited capabilities on coming up with brand new, spanking new technology. So I like the idea that we are promoting from within. She's getting her field promotion. So when we're designing a lot of her units, we're really coming at it from a like field mod attitude. If you look at World War II, even modern day, like a Sherman tank looks one way when it came off the factory showroom floor, but all throughout that war, there was probably 50 to 100 variants of that thing to fill very specific needs that you only find out when you're on the combat field. So she's kind of like that sort of logic in that she's got Cyclopses, she's a Hellbringer, so it's all about the fire. How can I put flamethrowers onto all these other vehicles and weapons that I have, and how does that affect my combat capability?
So we got a couple, I think, early 3D renders maybe, and you guys were trying out some concepts?
These are just literally early, kind of just paint overs of some Geo, just when we were trying to test out what we wanted to do with her. We chose Cyclops because our heroes in the game, we want them to have a big, bold presence on the battlefield, regardless of the leader. And Cyclops felt like a really nice choice with her because, as I mentioned before, they're very flexible. We can do lots of things to them, and they're mechs. And what's cooler than putting flamethrowers on mechs?
And I think this is a little animation test.
Just some early kind of walk cycle, again, just testing out what we'll read at camera. A lot of this stuff, if you ever see it online in the future, if we ever release some of this stuff, you always have to look at it in context, because when you look at it from like a first-person perspective or down low, it might look kind of weird as far as proportions, because we have to exaggerate certain things so that it looks correct at camera. But I think it's going to be a pretty compelling, cool unit.
I mean, did you guys specifically say we were talking last night, fire hasn't really had much of a place in the Halo universe. We have the super old school flamethrower that didn't really make its appearance officially, I think, until Halo PC, and then we had a flame grenade, at one point, but fire hasn't been that prominent. You were joking that it's because it's expensive from a graphical perspective.
It is. It's a joke. It's just kind of usually the way it goes. I mean,
but did you guys say we haven't had fire before, or let's have fire, let's build a character around fire, or they just organically kind of turned into a character who happens to specialize in fire?
I mean, it was a little bit of both. It was the designers over at CA coming up with some ideas, and us giving them opportunities, things in the Halo universe that haven't been played with a lot before. CA has been really great about, trying to really understand what's happened in Halo previously, what players have loved, what we've seen a lot of and what we've seen a little of. And so, like you said, fire seemed to be an opportunity to move in. Hellbringers are fun. They were already there.
And under the hood, you got a lot of AoE. So, those original 6 leaders, look at those as a good base core selection and combat capabilities. Now that we're into the DLC, we can get a little bit more focus into specific combat styles. And she's definitely in your face, AoE, short range, but pretty devastating at that short range. So, as these DLC leaders roll out, you'll see them being very much more focused into a specific combat play style, and we're hoping that players, now that they've got a good handle on the game, they can kind of dive into that more specific combat types. And my most exciting is how people are going to team those up. It's going to be pretty awesome.
So this is just a glimpse at Kinsano's Blitz card, and if you're not familiar, just quickly, Blitz is one of the brand new game modes introduced in Halo Wars 2. It's kind of our, I guess, faster, more action-oriented, quicker style of play. It kind of forgoes the need to build bases and advance through tech trees, and all that's still in the game. You can still play deathmatch and strongholds. And Kinsano can be used in all the modes of the game, including her units and abilities. But when you get her from the store as an add-on, you'll open up a pack, you'll get all of Kinsano's units. So here we'll see her Cyclops. Her sort of master ability is something called the Flame Wall, which it's pretty devastating. It actually unleashes both flamethrowers at the same time, essentially. Massive spray. Here's a quick screenshot I was able to take before I left the office. Just the amount of fire output, it's pretty crazy. She can shut down, I think, infantry advances super well, and very quickly, as you mentioned earlier, can destroy bases and structures as well.
Yeah, with all these leaders, they're going to definitely have their strengths, and they'll also have their weaknesses. So her strengths clearly are against structures. She's going to be really good against spam, infantry, things like that. But at a cost, she might not be as effective against air units or long range.
So, of course, Kinsano has to have some friends and units that help to define her, and one of her signature units is the Flame Hog.
Yeah. And as I was mentioned before with the Cyclops, you can just say unit plus flamethrower, and that's usually a good ingredient.
That's the common theme I think we'll see for these next few slides, is taking things that are familiar and finding a way to strap some fire onto it. Yes.
Yeah.
This is one of the early tests, I guess, or pretty close to final.
A lot of this is, these are just unit renders that we need for our cataloging and things like that, but we're always evaluating from a silhouette standpoint. Like, we need you to understand what it is. So as I mentioned way at the beginning of our conversation, having those hallmark signature attributes about the core unit, it still needs to look like a Warthog, even though it's a different Warthog. So while it does have flamethrower and like giant fuel tanks, it still needs to read as a Warthog. So these kind of hybrid units are an extra layered challenge in that it needs to feel like something truly new, but still feel very familiar.
And I think from a gameplay perspective, the Flame Warthog, it has a little shorter range than a regular Warthog, so you have to be a little more sort of tactical and deliberate of when and how you use it. And it's going to be more effective against infantry and structures than a regular Hog, but as Jeremy noted, it is more vulnerable to air, in some cases extra enemy vehicles as well. So that's kind of the trade-off. And then here's a quick look at the Flame Warthog card. As you would see that in Blitz. Also comes with the rush ability keyword. So for Blitz, when you drop a card in, the rush ability means right when it hits the ground, it's got full health, full damage, it's ready to rock. So again, kind of playing into Kinsano's theme of sort of speed and agility. A lot of her units are going to hit the ground and be effective immediately upon entering the battlefield.
She's all about closing the gap.
And then she also has a slightly modified, one of her other units upgraded from the Flame Warthog is simply this guy here, which I think we're just calling the Veteran Flame Hog. And if I understand it, the Veteran Hog, just a little beefier, a little more expensive card to play, but it's going to be a little tougher, do a little more damage.
And a slight tweak on that main weapon, too. So the base one, you've got a heavy, but still basically a flamethrower, whereas this turns into a little bit more of a flame mortar. So while you're still getting AoE, it just gives you like slight extra range.
When you're working these into your Blitz deck, it also gives you options for how you want to use the Flame Hog. If you want to have the cheaper, faster, lower range one, if you want to have the more expensive, longer range one, harder hitting, just kind of gives you some choices when you're building your decks out.
And I think that's a perfect example here. We already have Hellbringers in the game now. I think it's, at least in Blitz, it's 10 cost cards, 10 or 20 off the top of my head. So it's a little cheaper, kind of more throwaway, whereas Kinsano comes with veteran Hellbringers that are, like you said, a little more expensive, a little tougher though. Used the right way, could certainly be a lot more effective. But as you'll note here, 0 actual ability to attack air, and the red showing us that versus infantry, versus vehicles, the veteran Hellbringers are not going to be very effective at all. And then Kinsano, in addition to her new units, will also come with a handful of brand new unique abilities. And this first one here, I've been toying around with a little bit. It's awesome. It's called the Hell Drop. And the Hell Drop actually drops down drop pods like we have in the game currently. There is an ability that will drop some ODSTs, except this one drops in Hellbringers. Right. And the pods, when they land, explode and do an AoE fire effect.
It's like ODSTs plus fire.
Yeah.
Continuing that.
So it's fire added with fire and guys that jump out shooting more fire, right?
It's subtle.
She's definitely the shock and awe leader.
And they're pretty, at only a 60 energy cost, this is a card that you can use pretty frequently in your deck in Blitz. So kind of, again, playing back into her theme. You can use her stuff a lot. She's very satisfying. Hell Drop's going to be really fun when you guys get your hands on it. One of her other abilities she had is called the Hell Charge. Looks in this concept art, it looks like her whole team's on fire.
It doesn't actually light her people on fire.
Okay,
but,
okay. But what this is actually, it is a buff. So you would target your own friendly units. You'd use the Hell Charge, and then it gives them a speed bonus and a damage boost. And when they die, they explode. So totally fair.
Definitely getting out of the grounded technology thing I was talking about before, but in a game, it's pretty awesome.
But we do have blast units in the game currently. If you've played, I'm sure you've felt the pain of a jackrabbit sneaking in and taking out your entire ridge line there. But like we said earlier, if you have an air unit, these guys, this basically does nothing for you. So it's easy to avoid, but again, you got to watch out. You drop a Hell Charge in, it's going to change the tide of battle almost immediately. She has a couple other sort of really sweet ones. This ability is called the Napalm Missiles. So it's very similar to what you'll see currently in the game with Captain Cutter's Archer missiles, except, of course,
with
with fire. It's a very powerful, and actually not only does it burn, it leaves behind that damage over time effect. So any units that are still there that maybe weren't fully finished off will just burn until they die.
And hopefully we're not painting the picture that she's like super OP. Like these are also like tier level things. So by the time you're dropping this thing, you're going up against some pretty nasty things, like probably a couple scarabs, some condors. Like everybody else is going to be dropping some pretty nasty stuff as well.
Yeah, and then here's her blitz card real quick, or sorry, her just for context, it costs 100 energy, so it's not something you're going to be spamming a lot of. But, you know, in the regular modes of play, deathmatch, skirmish, this is a higher tier ability that you will take some time to get to and unlock. And then probably my personal favorite, her real signature ability, is because we haven't had enough fire yet, is something called the Inferno. And this essentially starts a raging inferno on the area that you target, does massive initial damage, and then has a very long-lasting burning effect.
That poor little grunt down in the front, he's just not having a good day.
No, he's not. So this is a really expensive ultra-level card in the regular game. If you're playing Deathmatch, for example, this is like your sort of ultimate tier unlock. So it's going to take some time of game to get this. Here's a base before the Inferno. And here's a base after the Inferno. So really looking forward to seeing what players do when they get their hands on Kinsano. And then just quickly, it's worth pointing out there's some things that you'll get with Kinsano that aren't available in Blitz, but they are available in the other game modes, like Strongholds, Domination, Deathmatch. So when you pull up your leader's radio wheel, like we see here, kind of gives you a sense going, you know, the ones at the top are the most powerful. You'll start on the right, kind of at the 1 o'clock, and then as you progress through your game and level up, you'll unlock each of those subsequent abilities. So a few of these that are really interesting to point out. She does have another passive called Redline. This one I've tried out a few times, but it gives speed and damage boost for a limited time for all newly spawned units. So you would activate that, then spawn in new units, and they would come out already with a boost ready to go. And as you level that up, that effect gets more and more powerful, starts to also affect vehicles, aircraft. They get a permanent speed boost once you get up to level 2. So again, she's really adept at boosting and improving her forces. One of her other passives that's worth noting, I think, is called the Heat of Battle. This is a temporary buff that allows your units to briefly become highly resistant to damage, and then every time they kill someone, they get a small damage boost in return. So it's I don't think we have anything else in the game like that dynamically at the moment. So the more they kill, sort of the more angry and powerful they become. And our designer's kind of pointing out that effect can very quickly change what looks like you're about to be defeated to quickly overturning the tides and actually winning that encounter. We talked about the Flame Warthog already. She has a drop ability where she can drop in 3 veteran Flame Hogs at once right into the field of battle, ready to go. Another one that's my personal favorite is called the Firestorm Battle Group. And what this does, it's very expensive. It's kind of one of her ultimate units, but it drops in a Hellbringer, a Scorpion, and 2 Hornets that are all veteran, and it buffs the drop zone with a max level Hell Charge. So I am assured that this is not OP. But, you know, again, like all these things, I think it's going to be really fun to play. We want to get this out into the wild, and we'll be watching and listening to see how fans find new, unexpected ways to leverage Kinsano and do really nasty things to their opponent. So I think after we've given you all that heads up, best thing to do now, we'd love to just give you a glimpse of Kinsano in action. We have a little bit of gameplay that we captured at the office. So if we could just roll we have just some raw gameplay footage of Kinsano doing her thing, and we'll kind of put some of what we just said into visuals. So when you first, I was going to talk over this.
No, you're not.
I guess I'm not. I don't know if we have that technology. Hello? Okay, there we go. Yeah, sorry. You can let it still play if I can talk over it. Great. So when you get Kinsano, you'll actually get 5 packs. That's how you'll receive her. You'll open her. You'll get at least one of every unit and ability, and then you'll also get a mix of duplicates, which will allow you to extra power up. So I think here we're seeing just a whole lot of fire being rained down. Kevin, Jeremy, feel free to jump in here. We got our little squadron of Flame Hogs that we talked about. The veteran Flame Hogs.
Yep.
Here we've
Kinsano there in her Cyclops in front of the base.
Yeah, she's really effective against structures, as Hellbringers are in the core game.
even got myself a little achievement there.
Good job. can see the health ticking down on all the buildings in the base right now. That's nasty if she can get it off.
And just for good measure, I'll put the hell charge on our troops, giving them that crazy speed and damage boost. Again, the buff. Attack speed, damage buff. And then we talked about this one earlier. Here comes the hell drop in a game of Blitz. So it sets the ground on fire, and then a bunch of fire-breathing allies emerge as well. Comes a napalm strike, I believe. That was just the level 1, so this will get a little stronger as you play and level up.
So if you're playing here, something to keep in mind though is like most of the time, unless you're playing against somebody who's AFK, nobody's going to just lay there and let you burn them to death like that. So you're probably not going to be able to just roll up and start firing stuff. You're going to have to keep them. She's fast, so you're going to want to keep moving around and microing some of this stuff because she will be vulnerable to things like air and if somebody's dropping templates on you.
I was playing the AA on easy, by the way.
Yeah, there you
for
go.
the sake of showing off her awesome burning abilities. And again, she looks crazy OP, but like Jeremy keeps pointing out to me, the easiest way to counter Kinsano is to come at her with air units because she has almost no native air defense whatsoever.
Yeah. That's what I'm most excited to see is how people pair them up because she herself is powerful, but if she can be countered fairly easily, like who's the best partner to play with her? Is it her and Anders? Is it her and Isabel?
And that was that Firestorm battle group we just saw. I dropped in four friendly units ready to go. So that's just a little glimpse of our Kinsano gameplay. We are super excited to get her out into the wild. As of right now, it looks like she'll be coming out as soon as next week, so we'll have more information on that soon. We have a little bit of time left. We'd love to open the floor up for questions if people have questions about Halo Wars 2 or anything that might fall into the purview of Kevin and Jeremy. We have some mics, I believe, in the aisles, and let's hear it.
Oh, nice. Got some people.
Oh, we can see people now.
Would you like to go first?
No, manners. You guys are awesome.
So, in regards to the story regarding the ending of Halo 5, the UNSC Infinity is on the run from Cortana. They are unaware of the events going on in the Ark and on the Ark. Do you think it would be possible that they would most likely go there, seeing as it can activate all the Halo rings that are not destroyed currently?
It would be possible. Obviously, we brought Halo Wars up into modern-day Halo for some really good reasons. I mean, the original Halo Wars took place about 25, 28 years before the events when, Master Chief started getting up to his fun. And it was done intentionally, so it was kind of off in this area of the universe, and it was a separate story. With Halo Wars 2, we moved it into modern-day Halo, so now it's part of the ongoing universe. It's part of the ongoing storyline. So we've got opportunities to have those kinds of crossovers in the future. Really, like I said earlier, our first job for Halo Wars 2 was to make sure that we bring the crew back, we introduce the important new characters and give them a good, proper introduction and grounding in the universe, and then see where it goes from there. But yeah, they're coming in. I mean, the events of Halo 5 actually have some really important connections to the very beginning of the story in Halo Wars 2 already for people who've been paying attention and checking out the dates. The Phoenix logs that are in Halo Wars 2, those kind of in-game extra story entries in there, were something we put together with Creative Assembly and one of the writers on the Halo franchise team at the studio at 343, who's the team that helps us keep track of all the stories in all the Halos everywhere. Directly connects the events of those games. So if you haven't checked that out already, go back and take a look, and then think about where that might go in the future.
Hey guys, I was just curious, as a hardcore Halo Wars 1 fan and Halo Wars 2, I was curious how you guys approached some design changes. For example, minor things also, like Cobra is now called Kodiaks, or there's no more Hawks, but there's Grizzlies. And I know you changed, not you changed, but the voice actress for Anders changed, so her design changed pretty significantly. How do you guys have those conversations? Is it challenging? Is it people's preference?
Sure.
I mean, it's always challenging,
Yeah, I was
just
gonna say
because we know what we're messing with. I mean, the respect that we have to treat this, because all the time that you've spent, I mean, speaking directly to you, but everybody else who's played that first game and kind of got used to Anders like that, or got used to certain units in the first game as well. So any change that we take very seriously.
Yeah.
Like, we don't do any of this lightly, but we always do them when there's a really good reason, we think, and when it makes the universe better. I think.
And usually that reason is just what's going to make the most fun game experience. So to your point of the Cobra is not meant to be the Kodiak. They're not one and the same. The designers, like with CA, they're looking at the roster all up and trying to balance like strengths and weaknesses. And so we wanted to introduce a new category of weapon, which is our siege. So Kodiak's blister back swords, that more indirect kind of firing, and Cobra is pretty much line of sight. Like it's a railgun essentially. So there were tweaks like that where it wasn't, oh, we want to drop this because we don't like it. It's because they wanted to get a capability or a new feature into the game, and we tried to keep as much of the core as possible. So again, we don't want to alienate the Halo Wars 1 fan base, but at the same time, we're not remaking Halo Wars 1. We want to introduce enough new stuff so that it feels like a new game with its own attributes, but at the same time feel connected enough to that first one that it doesn't feel like we completely departed from it. So yes, there's always those fringe cases where it's like, it's a tough choice.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. So Blitz is awesome. I'll be honest, it's pretty crazy, but there's only one arena. Are we going to see more rolling out in the near future?
Yeah, we've heard that feedback even during the beta, and it's something that the team's been talking a lot about since the beta. I will say, in my own conversations with the 343 designers, some of the CA designers at Creative Assembly, they initially were approaching the mode with sort of a let's see how people respond to it. I think they went into it with kind of the mentality of like a League of Legends or a Dota, where those games are generally played out on one map, the same map. Let's let players focus on the strategy of their cards and their decks without having to then take in a variable of a lot of different maps that might play differently. So I think that's where they originated from, but based on fan feedback and that people are enjoying the mode, but they are asking for changes, I know those conversations are definitely underway. Yep. And if and when additional multiplayer content comes to Halo Wars 2, it will not be tied to DLC. There'll be no charge for it. It's very important that all players have access to that. So I'm pretty optimistic that the conversations are happening, that people want to do the right thing. We've heard the fan feedback. So I can't give you a definitive answer, but we've heard it loud and clear, and we want to obviously give the best experience possible to fans.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
It's me again. So you guys know I love Halo. I will always love Halo. But I have to ask, do you have a response to fan complaints that the story quality, especially in Halo 5, is not what it used to be?
That's a complicated question. Thanks for pointing that over here.
Yeah, you only have like 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's hard just because there's so much history that we all have with Halo and kind of what we all look to Halo to represent to us from gaming, and like from escapism, from action, from character immersive experiences. And, as a Studio 343, we appreciated all the history that came in with Halo, taken over from Bungie, and the great job that they started Halo 1, 2, 3, Master Chief, obviously. And we've learned things along the way. We've learned some things, and something I mentioned earlier in particular is making sure, moving forward, that we're going to keep all of our stories very contained to the game. I think that is something that Bungie did very, very well at the start. And I've said before that the story for Halo CE, the first Halo, was really one of my biggest inspirations for the story for Halo Wars 2, is that it was all right there. It was a very concrete, discrete challenge. You've got your good guys and you've got your bad guys, and you set them up and they go after it. And that you didn't need to read a bunch of books on the outside, and you didn't need to understand where every character came from and their entire backstory. And so that's something that, we're picking up, and it's hard because at the same time, you want to reward all the time that everybody has spent, that you've spent in the universe to this date. So I suppose that's a long-winded answer of we're always going to try to improve. We're always working on it. We're always paying attention to what everybody here and everybody out there is saying about the stories, the things that we do well, the things that maybe we didn't do so well, and hopefully next time we'll do them a little bit better. So we know the responsibility that we have in maintaining the Halo universe, and we take that really seriously. And so we're full-time working to make sure that all the stories we deliver are ones that live up to the Halo name.
Okay, Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi guys. Going back to the DLC, how many leaders should we be expecting, and how often should we be expecting new content?
We just gave you fire. You're not cool with fire? Like, no.
Great question. I don't know if I'm allowed to say a number. I do know we have content coming every month. There'll be content drops.
For about 6 months?
Yep. Actually, hopefully at some point they'll put this last slide back up because we wanted you guys to see this too. But Kinsano should be coming out next week. The team's going to work really hard, kind of targeting ideally maybe like the second or third, I think the second Wednesday of the month, but roughly around the middle of the month, we're going to be getting a content drop out. I'd say at least anywhere more than.
We're wondering what we can say without getting fired right
There's
here.
plenty of leaders
Yes.
coming,
Yes.
okay? And I would also say that not every leader that's coming has a direct canon fictional tie into the story
Yeah.
itself either, right? For example, we have Forge in the game right now solely as a bonus leader. Forge is not suddenly, his story has
No,
not
he's
changed.
still super dead. And Dan Ayub is going to get mad at me for saying that, and I probably did just get fired. Hey, Dan. But no, we wanted to set the Halo Wars 2 multiplayer in a kind of a non-canonical space. Not that we aren't using canonical characters, but if we want to have somebody like Forge come back in because he's just great, we can do that without having to try to come up with an excuse about the Forerunners saved one of his dendro somethings, and anyway, that gets a little eye-rolly quick. So we've got lots of room to have fun with some new leaders in the future. Some will be some fan favorites. We've got some that'll be a little bit silly, and sometimes a little silly is good. And if anybody who's played Halo for a while knows who's silly in Halo. But yeah, we've got some more leaders, and that's a really interesting slide, and those silhouettes, and
Yeah, I
anyway,
think-
just a thing.
And we also have some campaign missions that'll be coming as well. So
Mhm.
it's I believe it's going to be about a solid 6 months at least worth of content. So kind of do the math, figure that out. It'll all be available right now. You can either get the season pass or you can just get it a la carte as it's released.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Cool.
All right, hey guys, my question is, what is your favorite multiplayer leader? Standard, Blitz, doesn't matter, and I'll let you stick to ones that you've actually talked about.
Exactly. I'm going to say Atriox just because I like getting in there and causing ruckus. Plus, when you get his warlords in late on in Blitz Firefight, I suspect a big group of those guys
I
can
think
hang on for a while.
Like for a death match, definitely probably like either an Atriox, maybe a shipmaster. Blitz, definitely shipmaster. I like fast, skirmishy kind of harassment, and he's fun in deathmatch too because you can teleport. Like there's nothing better when somebody rolls up to thinking they're gonna base smash you, and you just grab all their dudes and just chuck them, halfway across the map. That's the best.
I'm definitely partial right now to Kinsano. I've been spending the last 2 weeks playing as her, just getting up to speed, taking screenshots, video. She's just very different. She's unique. I like the buffs, and the fires just doesn't get old. So for now, she's definitely my favorite at the moment. Yeah.
All right, thanks guys.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to know what happened to Serena from the first game.
Have you played
So,
Halo Wars 2?
and that's a sad way to end the talk. So, Serena, this happens in the opening cinematic, so I'm not going to call it a spoiler, and I want to answer your question right. In the Halo universe, Serena was a smart AI, and in the Halo universe, smart AIs can only live for about 7 years before they.
I know that.
Oh, sorry, you know that. Okay. So anyway, if you do the math from the end of the first Halo Wars game, Serena is way past her 7-year lifespan. So in that opening cinematic of the game, there's a recording that she's left for her captain. And she had to take care of her own arrangements, she says in that, as if she didn't want to put the captain through having to kind of kill his friend. So it's a little dark, and I'm sorry for that in hindsight. But it's something where we wanted to follow the rules of the universe and also put Cutter in a situation where he kind of needs some help. And then he runs into this new AI named Isabel, and they work things out.
I also wanted to say the thing about having Sergeant Forge in the skirmish or the thing where you could play with him in Halo Wars 2. I do know the only thing that's a little bit annoying about him is when you keep pressing the Y on the enemy in the first game, he was like ramming, like he kept saying ramming, rolling, because, that's...
Yeah, no, I know. Writing those lines for the battle voiceover for those characters is an interesting art in video games because when you have to come up with 37 different variants of ramming, or grenade, or I'm on fire for Kinsano. It gets a little weird after a while, so we're always balancing. I mean, the real gameplay answer on that is you have to balance how often you hear that, because the player, you hit a button, you want to have confirmation that you did it, and your unit knows what they should get up to. But you don't want to do it too much, because after a while, you're just like, Forge, shut up, I get it. So, yeah, so it's always a balance, and hopefully we have enough ramming for you.
But are you gonna have that dialogue in the Halo Wars 2?
In Halo Wars 2?
I think it just says ramming all the time,
I think
right?
just ramming, just everything,
Constantly.
ramming, like base deployed, ramming,
all units.
everything.
Say,
All units. So, thank you. We're getting red flashing lights, which means we've gone
The
over our
timer's
time.
angry
But I'll
with
tell you
us.
what, I feel like we can probably just hang out for a little bit in the back once we can clear out of here. So we didn't get to all the questions, but if you want to stick around,
Yeah, stick around, please.
I'll go ahead and commit these two guys to hanging out for a little bit.
Good man.
We'll stay back in the back. But thanks so much for coming. Thanks everybody online.
Thanks, everybody.
Kinsano's coming out next week. Thank you.